Happy Monday, everybody. I hope everybody had a great weekend. As always, I'm excited for this week talking about a little bit of a follow up to last week and a little bit inspired by something that happened in one of my lessons this week as well, which is always fun to sort of see those like specific real world examples and be able to sort of share some ideas. And it's one of my favorite parts of teaching as well, is that I'm always sort of learning new things from my students and discovering new ways of learning as well. And I think that's so important for all of us wherever we're at in the journey, is to keep learning and keep improving. So it's always fun when I get to sort of see that in practice. Last week we talked about creativity in practice and how being more creative and finding more creative solutions can be really beneficial for you. And this week, I want to follow up with how to find the right solution and how important it is to actually be finding the right solution. So, the thing that happened in my lessons this week is one of my students was working on some articulation exercise and just sort of tonguing up in the upper clarion, and was getting sort of really thuddy articulation and just like not a good sound on the articulation as it got up into those higher notes. As is so common, we all struggle with the upper clarion articulation, and it can be really finicky with undertones or thuddiness or sometimes even squeaking or just notes not even coming out up in those upper notes. I think probably pretty much everybody is familiar with some of that like not great quality of upper clarion articulation that was sort of happening. And I asked him what might be some good practice techniques to sort of work on improving that and how to improve that. And he suggested maybe doing some like different rhythmic subdivisions, or maybe like practice rhythms on it, or maybe doing something like focusing on the fingers being a little bit snappier, or something like that, or doing some kind of fingering drill on it. And I think those are great practice strategies, especially if we're thinking like, okay, do a practice technique, or try a practice strategy on this. I think practice rhythms is one of the most common ones that everybody knows, where you switch up the rhythm a little bit. And that is a really useful and really helpful practice strategy. In this particular situation, though, I don't think that would have done anything to improve the problem. It would have improved some things. It might have made the rhythm a little bit more confident and a little bit more accurate. The snappy fingers maybe would have made a little bit cleaner, clearer connections between things and improved the finger coordination and dexterity, which is all good stuff. But none of those things were actually going to solve the problem of the upper clarion articulation sounding bad. And this is where it's so important to be really clear about what the problem is so that you can actually come up with an effective solution for it. So, last week, talking about the creativity, it's great to be creative and find as many solutions as you can. We just need to make sure that those solutions are actually going to be effective solutions for the problem at hand. And this is where the deliberate practice process, I think, can be really helpful. So, the way that I like to think of the deliberate practice process is do, reflect, and then plan. Most of the time people say plan, do, reflect. It doesn't matter so much the order of it, but I like that order because you do it and then you reflect and sort of hear and assess and analyze what's going on as you're doing it, and then that will lead to an effective plan to do it deliberately differently and actually get a better result. So for this student, and if this is happening for you with sort of thuddy, undertony high notes and upper clarion articulation, that's the doing part. And in the reflection, you reflect, and the surface level is, oh, that was thuddy. The sound wasn't good. There were undertones on the high notes. I didn't like the way that articulation sounded. Great. You now have a sort of surface level reflection, but now we need to dive deeper with that to actually make an effective plan and find the right solution for it. So going deeper with that, you have to ask, is it actually the rhythm that's the problem? Is it actually the fingers that are the problem? Or is it something else? And I think for the student, it was the sound that was the problem. So if the sound is the problem, and when we're doing this upper clarion articulation, it's not sounding good, Then we have to continue to go deeper and figure out what's wrong with the sound. Is the tongue moving too much? Is the tongue hitting the reed too heavily? Is the air support not there? And go deeper and deeper. In this particular situation, I think it was sort of an air support situation. So we identified that, okay, these notes aren't coming out well because the sort of support and tone isn't there in the first place. Now we can get creative and come up with a plan to get the air support and get the tone in place to then make sure that the articulation doesn't mess that up and that there is actually something to articulate that's going to sound good. So that was the plan that we came up with, is to try playing as a practice technique. Instead of doing 4 tongued notes on each pitch, put the first 2 together and kind of treat it as like maybe a half note long tone and then 2 quarter notes tongue. So instead of getting th 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 th, we did thee 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 thee. And by having that more sort of support and finding that long tone sound first, we're able to maintain the sound on the tongued notes better as well. So that's a perfect example of finding the right solution. We could have done practice rhythms and finger drills and all kinds of stuff like that all day and would have never actually solved the problem because we weren't getting to the root of what was actually going wrong. We were just kind of throwing random practice strategies and practice techniques at it instead of targeting the practice techniques to what we really need. So hopefully that makes sense and you can imagine ways to apply this in your practice. And this is also where the creativity comes in. It's sort of creativity within boundaries where we're still trying to solve one specific problem, but we're going to be as creative as possible to come at that problem from as many different angles as we can, but making sure that we're still going for the right solution and targeting the right problem every single time. So that's what I want you to do in your practice this week. That's your little motivation and inspiration. And you can actually turn that into your plan by filling out your practice template. Here's my practice template for this week. You can get this exact template at quickstartclarinet.com/get started, or you can just fill it out in your practice journal or however you keep track of things. It's just the date for the week, the reflection of how things are going for you, your goal for what you want to accomplish this week, and then your plan for when and what you're going to do. And if you fill out that practice template and actually implement it, then you're going to sort of reflect on what you've been doing the past week. You're going to plan what your goal is for this week and what and when you're going to do it, and you're going to do it. And that's also a form of deliberate practice at the more macro scale. And then when you're doing your practice, do it on the more micro scale as well and reflect deeply enough that you can be really specific and clear about what the problem is so you can be creative and come up with effective solutions to get you to the end goal and what you're actually trying to achieve. So let me know if you have any questions about any of this in the comments. Let me know if there's any particularly ineffective practice techniques you've been doing or any new ways that you're going to think about finding more targeted and more effective practice solutions for you to get to that right solution. I hope that you have a fantastic week of practice. Thanks so much for hanging out and being here today. And I will see you next week, next Monday, for the next live Monday music motivation. Have a great week, everybody. Fill out your practice template right now so that you actually get that done and have a good week of practice. Bye.